Okay. Hi guys, I hope you are relaxing and enjoying this break we're getting during coronavirus and using the time to be as creative as possible with your leatherwork. What I'm going to do is just first give a refresher on how to stitch. Okay, now these are the basic tools that you're going to need. You're going to need your stitching pony, a strop, some paste for the strop, jeweler's rouge, aluminium buffing paste, steel rule, a wing divider, decent glue, a bit of leather to put the glue on with, an overstitcher, a straight awl with an awl handle, a diamond awl with the awl handle, or a stitching awl, diamond chisel, some thread, 2 harness needles, a beveler, a slicker, and a belt edge pen and some belt edge. You'll also need your knives. You may not all have a half moon knife. Sharp knives, I just use my Victorinox. I put on a hell of a sharp blade onto it, and a roller cutter, which is incredibly sharp. Okay, so we're going to stitch, and first we're going to need some leather to stitch together. You can use your roller cutter. This will work great. Cut it nice and easy, and get the shapes to what you want and how you want it. If you want to measure it out, it's quite easy with a wing divider, whatever sort of size you want to go for. Say 2 centimeters, run it down the side. There you got a 2 centimeter strip. Okay. Again, you can use your other cutters to cut it. For instance, your half moon, which works fantastically and gives you a nice clean cut, as does the roller cutter, or a hell of a sharp knife, but doesn't give the same clean cut, but certainly does the job. If you look at the piece there, there's a bit of feathering at the bottom, which doesn't happen with a roller cutter or a half moon knife. Okay. Of course, you've got to be working on a cutting board, and on top of your cutting board, a piece of leather, so that you don't blunt your knives quite as much. As you're working, keep using your strop. Use a bit of the polishing paste, get it on, and you can strop your blade back into a razor's edge. Okay, so you've cut your leather, you've got the pieces that you want to stitch. Over here, I've got 2 nice squares that we're going to stitch together. They're both about 3.5 mil substance leather, which is a fair amount, and we know we're going to stitch about 3.5 mils away from the edge. I've gone and spaced out an area over here of approximately 1.5 centimeters. Okay, on the inside, I know that's where I've got to glue, because even if I take a 5 mil stitch, I know that my stitching is then going to line in the center of the glued area. Okay, so what we do is we've got our 2 pieces marked out where the glue must go. I prefer Super 65. It's probably the best glue out there, incredibly tough. All it takes is a little bit of leather and spread the glue in the area that you wanted. Likewise on the other half. put those both to dry for a good 10-15 minutes so that they become completely dry. Okay, so now you've got your two dry pieces. They're pretty much hardly even tacky. You go ahead and place them together. Take your hammer. And lo and behold, you've got the two glued pieces. Gluing is vital when it comes to stitching because that's what's going to keep the two pieces together while you are stitching. It's also beneficial when you finally want to finish the article. Okay. I'm going to measure off 5 mils, make it a bit easier for myself, and go ahead and stitch along that line. I then need to use my overstitcher, which you want to use your body weight on it and run it along that line where I want to stitch. Now each hole is equidistant, straight on the line. You could go ahead and decide to use your diamond stitching chisel. You'd obviously choose a size of wheel that would fit it, and you could go punch your holes along the way. I prefer using a diamond awl as I find it's a lot quicker, and at the end of the day it's the same job. Take a stitching pony. If you got one of the big ones, that bow, you're privileged, but it's pretty much the same thing. We sit down on our pony under our legs. We go, if we're right-handed, we put it facing the right. You always want to work from the face side of the material. Not, it's quite counterintuitive, not from the back of it. Put it about 2 to 3 mils in and tighten up your pony. Okay, now you take your stitching awl. I put my finger on the flat of it, not the edge but the flat, and that's to steady my finger when I try and find the hole. I find the hole, and then what I do is I actually twist the needle 45 degrees away from myself. Okay, there it is there, and then I just stab. Now the trick is to try and get everyone exactly the same, and to ensure that when you stab, you're stabbing at right angles to whatever it is that you're stabbing through. Invariably we might stab facing down or might stab facing up, and what that ends up doing is making the stitch at the back ugly. Okay, so we've got that there. They're all pretty much 45 degrees, equidistant, and we can start stitching. At this point, we take our harness needles. I prefer using a 2-knot needle. I think it's fine, and you pretty much can get any thread you want through on a 2-knot needle. First thing I do is I take the thread. In this case, because it's a thick braided thread, I cut it at an angle to get it through my needle. If you use a thinner thread, you're not going to have to bother about this. All I show is a dot of the thread. Okay, all you need to show is a little tip. Put your ivy needle over, force it through the center, catch it on the other side, and there we go. Pull a little bit through so that you can pierce the thread once, I like twice. Just keeps the leftover piece of thread straight all the way down. You pull it and then grab the long piece and pull it so that it's caught up there. The only way that thread's coming off is if you cut it. Then you must measure off a length that goes from your shoulder to the end to your hand. Okay, it's not a meter, it's the length of your arm from your opposite shoulder. The reason being is more than that can become quite difficult to work with. If you can figure it out, by all means. Then we need to go ahead and put another needle on the opposite side. Pull that through, feed it through the thread once, twice, bring it down, slide it all the way over the end of the needle, and so you start pulling the long side, and again do exactly the same thing so that you now have two needles on either side of your thread. Okay. If you can remember me showing you, I always keep both needles in my hands and the awl in my right hand, considering I'm right-handed. As if I'm smoking, the needles are kept in my hand so you don't scratch your leather. You never start with the first hole, you start with the second. Stretch the leather with your awl, put it through the needle. The first part is to get your thread equidistant. Once you've got it equidistant, you come back one and stretch it, put the needle through, then 2/3, make a cross, or stretch the first hole, push the needle through about 2/3, take the other needle and make a cross. You control the thread that's coming through, grab the thread of the first needle with your third finger, and all you do is just twist your hand around. What that does is puts tension on the thread, holds it down so that you won't pierce it when the other needle goes across the top of it. Once you get this side, you then push the needle through also 2/3, wrap it once, twice, pull across, and that's what makes the saddler stitch so special. It's actually made a knot inside there that if each stitch, as opposed to sewing machine, should one stitch be cut, all the stitches would run. Here, each stitch is its own knot, so if one stitch gets cut, it does not run. Now the first stitch has to be stronger than the rest of the stitches as to the last stitch. So we go back to the second hole, stretch it again, put our needle 2/3 through, cross it, grab the thread with my finger, control the other side, turn it round, put the thread over the top once, twice, put the other needle through 2/3, wrap it once, twice, grab the tip and pull it through. Now what you got on your first stitch is a double stitch, making it stronger. Now we just continue going along, stretching the hole first, putting it through, making a cross, grabbing it, controlling the thread, over the top, 2/3, once, twice, and stitch done. And so we continue to the next hole.
1, 2, and done. And on, and on. Pause it. And so we continue stitching, 2/3 through, cross, catch the thread, control the thread on the other side, once, twice, and pull. Your tension that you should pull on either side should be exactly the same. That will ensure that you pull the knot into the middle of the leather. Now we're coming up to the last hole, and as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have to make that also a double stitch in order to strengthen that hole. We go along, make the stitch as per normal, but then we come back one stitch, stretch that hole again, cross, catch it with your third finger, tension from the other side, controlling it, 1, 2 for the knot. Okay, now we've got 2 pieces of string that we don't know what to do with. You could cut them off at this point, or you could feed one through to the other side, cutting it off. But if you're stitching an item that's going to have it being shown on both sides, I like to do this little trick, because that's all leather work is really. It's a whole lot of tricks. Is I come back another hole, but instead of piercing it through, which you still got to do, and sending the thread on the other side, is I stretch it, I bring my thread up, my stitching all at least, towards the center of the stitch. I do the same on the other side. Try finding the same hole. There we go. And now all we need to do is put our one thread there, our other thread there as well, and all we need to do at this point is cut the threads off. Where you pulled it through, take your hammer again and just give it a smack to put it down. There you end up with a smart stitch going from the top down, top down, top down. It's stepping, it's equidistant, and it's carrying on. Now how do we finish once we've got this all done over here? We need to get this area over here nice and flat and joined neatly. One of the ways of doing it is that you can trim this edge with your half moon knife. You can trim this edge with your half moon knife. Basically all you're doing is getting both edges identical and trimmed off together. There you've got a nice even flat surface, and now we can start finishing it towards the end. can use yourself a 2 or a 3, whichever size you like, up to a 7 edge beveler or keen edge beveler that I'm using, and bevel the edge. Bevel the edge. You do the same on the other side. Both edges are now beveled and it's ready for slicking. Okay, so I've put, once it's been beveled, I've put it back into my stitching pony just for ease of work. I'm now going to slick that area on top so it becomes nice and glossy and looks like one piece. What I'm going to need to do is just wet that area over there. That's fine. Let that absorb a little bit. Then take my wood slicker, find a decent size, and start working it. When you start hearing that creaking, it means it's starting to slick. I'll go one size bigger because I haven't quite got the top. Back to the smaller. Now if you can see, I've got a nice smooth glossy finish. You can hardly feel the edge. You look at the article from the side, once the water's dried out, it's not going to look bad. You've now got a completely finished piece. At this point, what you can do is take your belt edger, dip your edge dyeing pen into the belt edge and just run it over the top evenly, and leave that to dry. You've got a finished stitched article. I've made a few articles while being on this lockdown period. The only time I've had, only chance that I've had enough time to make it. I've made 2 sheaths. As you can see, they're also finished on the edge as I've shown you, the stitching as per normal, and another one over there. And I've also made my wife a bookmark, which I'm going to show you guys in the next episode how to go and do some engraving. I'm in the process at the moment of making my son a prayer book cover, and you'll see this when it's finished, and I'll show you guys how to do this.